Right, so we have a file to download for today's class, crime.zip. So let's go ahead and download that and get it extracted. I think I've downloaded it, but I haven't extracted it yet. So I'm going to show in folder, just right click and say extract all. And that's a great place to put it. And I should have now all these files. So it turns out, must have been around 2011, 2012 or something. I was looking for a good example. I was looking for an interesting set of data to be able to work with. And today, there's a lot more interesting data sets just kind of publicly available on the web. But then there were a few out there, but they weren't, it was tough to find just the one that I was after. So I'm snooping around and I came across this data set from the FBI called Crimes Known to Law Enforcement. So, basically they say, if this has been reported to the police, that will ultimately get reported up to the FBI and they will aggregate the data and they'll be able to tell you how many different kinds of crimes that happen in each city. But then the one that I thought was really interesting is that they have it broken out by college campus. And I thought this would be pretty interesting for my students to be able to kind of look at different college campuses and see the crimes that are reported, crimes known to law enforcement. And so, but they just had summary information online, but there's a little note that said, if you want the full data set, email this guy. And I went, great, I'm gonna email this guy. And so I emailed, hey, I'm a professor Allen here at BYU. I'd really like to use this data set to be able to teach some stuff about data analysis. And like about 2 weeks later, I got an envelope from the FBI, had a CD in it. That was all awesome. I got the data. I mean, I didn't know, I thought it was pretty quick, actually. Federal agency, it was a couple weeks. And, so I get the data out and I look at it, and this is what the data is like. It's absolutely hideous. So it's all individual files. Of course, I want a set of data so I can make some pivot tables off and kind of snoop around the data. And look at these files. So let's just take a look at Alabama. It's not even like it's a comma delimited file. It's like meant to be printed. Here it is. So here's, Alabama A&M University. There's enrollment of 5,000. They had 16 violent crimes. What were they? There was no non-negligent manslaughter. Might have been some negligent manslaughter, but no non-negligent manslaughter. One forcible rape, 2 robberies, and 13 aggravated assaults. And there's 183 property crimes, burglary, theft, larceny, but no arson. Who had arson here? Who's this? So we had 1 case of arson at University of South Alabama, in the whole state for that year, 2011. And there was a murder. I wonder if it was an arson murder. Could have been, yeah. We're double counting here, 2 for 1. And so this is great, but you can build a pivot table off of this data the way it is, but it'll be really boring, right? Because it's just 1 state, it's 1 school, and you've got some data here that, yeah, it's a bad pivot table. But if you had all the states and all the schools, it'd be a pretty nice set of data. So, I'm just kind of bemoaning the fact that it's in such bad shape. I thought, I know VBA and I can do this, bring this data together. But I hadn't done it yet. And it's like a week later, like a week after I got it, I'm sitting in my office and my telephone rang, which is not that unusual. My telephone rang. What is unusual is to look over at the caller ID and have it say Federal Bureau of Investigation. Now, as it turns out, I live a really boring life. I can't imagine what the FBI would ever be interested in me for. But even so, when they were calling me, I thought I had this, my heart just kind of started to race. And I thought, oh no, they're going to come and arrest me or something. What will they arrest me for? I don't know. Being a bad teacher or something. And so I answered the phone. It was Dr. Allen. Oh, Dr. Allen, so we got a hold of you. Did you receive a disc with some crime statistics on it from us? I said, yeah, I got it right here. In fact, I pulled it out of my drawer. It's still right there on top. I said, yeah, I got it right here. I said, oh, good. I'm so glad. That's our master. Could you send that back to us? All of a sudden, I was feeling a little less confident in the law enforcement capabilities of the federal government. So that was odd, man. If you guys will quit calling me, I'll send back whatever you ask for. So haven't heard from him since, so that's good. All right. So we've got a project due Wednesday, right? The arrays project for Boggle. We have the next project due, I think not this week, but the next week we got a project due. That's on user forms. We've already done that. Now we're really starting the work for the next project today. The next project is going to be in database management. You're going to do the same thing that I had to do with this data. You'll look at this data and you write a program to kind of go across this data and import this data into a database. So I've got a lot to teach before you're ready for that one. But part of what you'll have to do is be able to manipulate these files, open these files one at a time, open up that workbook and then be able to go across it, get the data out, close that workbook, open the next workbook. And so that's really what we're doing today. So I'm looking at today's class thinking I'm going to give you guys the great start on this next project. I'll almost be able to just cut and paste what we do here in class today for that next project to get you going on it. So if you're making notes on anything, probably put a note for today's date for the video. This will be getting you started on that project, which we still have a lot to kind of cover before you're ready for it. So it's a ways off, but this is going to be a good day to remember. And by say remember, I don't mean remember the content. You can always look that up. I mean, remember that this is the day to go look stuff up on. All right, so I've got these files here. Let's go ahead and make a new workbook. And I'm going to locate this workbook in the same location as my crime folder. So it's not going to be inside the crime folder. It's going to be a sister or a brother or a sibling to the crime folder. So I'll have my workbook and my crime folder sitting in the same location. So Excel, brand new blank workbook, save as, we're going to be working with a file dialog box today, so maybe I'll call it that. I'm going to put it in downloads, and I will make an XLSM. I'll call it file dialog winter of 20. Just check and make sure I've got that in the right place. File dialog winter of 20 at the same place where my crime folder has been extracted. That'll be helpful when we get to that part later in the class. All right, but we're starting off with the file dialog. So Alt F11, I'm going to insert a module. Maybe I will view my various explorers, Project Explorer, and Properties window. All right, so really what we're after today is seeing how do we work with like files and folders? How do we interact with the operating system to deal with the whole file structure that we've got to work with? So let's go ahead and create a sub procedure. Let's create a function procedure called get folder path. And what I'd like this to do is I would like the user to go navigate and pick a path for a folder. And it turns out we've got some stuff built right into VBA. Well, we have some objects that are part of Excel that we can use from VBA to manipulate those, let the user pick something for us. Now, if you're working on Mac, what we're about to do is a Windows-only experience. If you Google this on, kind of Google it, you'll see how to do it on Mac. VBA for Mac has one really interesting thing that VBA for Windows doesn't have, and that is the ability to just invoke Apple script. Like Apple script is the Mac automation environment, and you can just, anything you do in Apple script, you can do in VBA because you can just say, this next part now is Apple script, and just do it. So that's really kind of powerful, and there's no really analogous functionality on the Windows side. So you can do the stuff we're doing. It's a different set of objects, and you do it through automating Apple script. But I recommend that for the homework that's due tonight, don't try to go down that road. It's too late for you. It'll take too long to learn it. So instead, just get to a PC somewhere if you haven't started, if you haven't done it yet. Okay. So we'll be working with some different objects. So let me go ahead and declare an object called the file dialog. I'll just call it FD for short, as office.fileDialog. Now, we're just creating an object variable. Just like when we say dim s as worksheet, it's just allocating enough memory to hold a memory address where some other object is located in memory. That's great. So now we're gonna bind that object on. So we're gonna say set fd equal to. Now, most of the objects that we work with object variables so far in class are objects that already exist. It's a range. We're binding onto a particular range, or we're binding onto a particular worksheet. We just want kind of an easier way to refer to that worksheet. Those things already exist. In this case, the file dialog has not yet been loaded into memory, and so we have to tell it to go create the object. Here's how we do it. Application dot file dialog. And then we give it an argument. We tell it which of all the 4 different kinds of file dialog do we want to use? And so there's one called the file picker. It seems like they could have come up with a better name than picker, but that's what it's called. Let's the user pick a file or multiple files. Then there's the folder picker. Let's the user pick a folder. Always just a single folder. You can't pick multiple folders. And then there's one specifically for opening stuff and then for saving as. I'm going to use the folder picker. And then we'll close the parentheses. And that is going to give us now, this will create an object in memory, and then we'll bind it onto FD so we can refer to it as FD dot. That will be how we refer to this particular object. And now we can show that dialog just by saying FD dot show. That should be it. Now, ultimately, we're going to want to return a value, but for right now, we can just run this, and it should be able to show us this dialog box. So we've got these 3 lines. I should be able to hit F5 and to run, and here it is. So this is my folder picker. You'll notice here's my crime folder. If I go into that, hey, where's all my files? Well, they're there, but this is only picking folders. It's not going to show you any files. You only get to see the folders when you use the folder picker. Now I can go kind of navigate up and see where else am I, G. Allen, users. Here's all the different folders that we have to choose from. You can pick one, say OK, and it's going to then remember which one that we just picked. Now, exactly how it does that is not especially intuitive to me. So here's how it works. So even though the folder picker can only pick a single folder, you can't pick multiple folders with it, it puts it into a set of things that you selected. It's because the file picker lets you pick an arbitrary number of files. And we kind of use the same approach here. So here's what we're going to do. Debug.print, and we're going to print FD's selected items property. We have a property called selected items. It's a collection, just like we have a collection of all the worksheets in a workbook, or a collection of all the charts, all the shapes on a worksheet. It's a collection of whatever you had selected. I think it's just a collection of strings. It's just the string representation of what you had selected.
So I'm just trying to think, you loop across that.
Yeah, you can. We will today. The question was, can you loop across the collection? The answer is yes, absolutely. So what's going to be the first one in the collection? What number? If it was an array, we'd expect it to be 0, but it's not an array. It is a collection, and so it's going to be 1. Collections always start counting at 1, right? That's the first sheet in your sheets collection is worksheet number 1. So that should just print the full path to whatever folder I chose. Let's give it a go. I'm going to run it again. And I'll just choose some, maybe I'll go to my users, to me, and downloads, and my crime folder. Say OK. And I've printed off that full path to that. That's the one that I had selected. So far, so good. This looks great. Now, but we got a problem. We've baked a problem in here. And that is, let's say I get to this part, and I decide, you know what, I changed my mind. I don't want to pick anything. What should I do? I got a couple of options. What do you think? Well, cancel, the cancel button, or just close this thing out. Either one will do the same thing. I'll say cancel, but now I've got an invalid argument. What's going on? Oh, how many items are in my selected list right now? 0, and I'm telling it to print the name of the first one. It's not there. There's nothing there. So you might think, oh, not a problem. We can just ask for the count. It's a collection after all. It's got a count property. We'll say if the count is greater than 0, then we do something. But it turns out there's a more direct way to tell if the user clicked OK or cancel. And that is the show method itself it's a Boolean method, a Boolean function. It will return true or false. If the user clicks OK, it returns true. Otherwise, it returns false. So I can just come in here and say if show equals true, and you don't have to put equals true, right? It's the same if you don't put equals true there, that's fine. Then we'll do that. And that should really get us set up. So now I'll stop this and run it again. Now if I select it, it still prints out my path. But if I hit cancel, nothing. No error. This doesn't print anything out, so we're in great shape. Except we want this function to return the value, not just print it out. Well, that's easy, because to make a function return a value, you're just going to have it set the name of the function equal to what you want it to return. I better make this return a string, so as string up here. And that way, if they cancel out, what will it return? If I don't hit this line, what is this function going to return? Empty string, yeah, it's the default value for the string type. So now I should be able to have call get folder path. It should return the value that we have selected, the path that we have selected. So I'm going to come make a procedure here just for testing this function. So call it my Acme debug tester. I don't know, ACME, my Acme debugger. Now I'll just do the print from here, debug.print. Now I'll call get folder path. You don't have to put the parentheses on, but most languages you do. So when I see those parentheses, I know, oh, it's not a variable, it's a call to a function that we have here. Clear off my immediate window, and I should be able to run this, and it should behave really just the same, but we set the structure up quite a bit differently. Still printing that value off, but now we're getting the result back from the function. And the homework, you haven't even looked at the homework yet, is just to put up the file dialog, let the user pick a folder and write it into A1. So, this is almost done. Okay, questions here on using the folder picker? All right, let's take a look at the file picker. So I'll make a sub procedure for this one. I'll call it file picker. In fact, it's so similar to what we've had before. I may just copy the guts out of the one we had before and bring it in here. We'll be doing something different on the inside of the if statement. And of course, this will be, instead of the folder picker, it will be the file picker. Now, it turns out the file picker will let me choose multiple items. So let's just go ahead and print off everything that got selected inside our if statement. So here, we'll loop across these items. So let me just dim x as an integer. We'll use a for next loop. For x equals 1, 2. How do we know how high to go? Where should we stop? The length of the collection. All collections have a property that tells me how many items are in it. What's the name of the property? Yeah, the count. So to fd.selectedItems.count. Very good. So just like we got the count of our worksheets that we can use to control the loop. And next. So now I will just print off whichever one we have selected. So selected items X, and I'll be printing that. And that's inside the loop, so I'm going to tab it in so that we see the structure a little bit better. So now if I run the file picker, it should still show up a dialog box. But now, because it's files, I can choose multiple files, and we'll print off all the files. Here's a whole set of files. Say OK, and it's printed off that whole set of files. Now, of course, if the user doesn't pick anything, it's going to return false, and so we'll skip by this and we'll just move on. But it turns out one of the great things about the file dialog is that we've got some kind of substantial configuration that we can do. So let's take a look at what some of the options are that we see when we run this. So one of them, and this will be the first one that we play with over here, is this filter. I mean, it's a really great drop down right now. There's only one thing to choose. There's not even a way to unchoose it. But we have control over this. We can put other items into this list. So let's just go ahead and do that. Let's say we're only interested in seeing macro disabled workbooks, XLSX workbooks. Let's go ahead and do that. So I'll cancel this. And so after I've created the object, before I show it, here's where I can configure it. So I'll come between these two lines. And here, I'm just going to say, you know what? I just want to clear off any other choices. So fd.filters.clear. And that'll say, hey, whatever is in this file dialog in the list of filters, blow it away. We're going to put in exactly what we want. So now we're ready to add a filter. fd.filters.add. Now we've got a couple of arguments here. The first one is the description. What's the English language or Spanish language or Portuguese language description that you want here? So I'm just going to say these are Excel files. Then my second one is going to be a filter that gets me down to just those ones that I want to see. So here, I'm just going to put star dot XLSX. And I do not need the parentheses here. I don't know what I was doing with the parentheses. It's not returning anything that I need to keep a hold of, and so I'm just going to add that item in. So now, instead of having all files, are clear, we'll get rid of that one, and we should only have one choice in so far, Excel files XLSX. I'm going to go ahead and run this and see what we get. And sure enough, Excel files XLSX, that's great. And so all I see is XLSX. I had some other XLSMs here, but they're not visible because they don't meet they don't match the pattern. Well, if I want all Excel files, I can actually just put a comma-separated list of filters right in here. So maybe I want kind of the three main file types, XLSM or XLSB. XLSB is a macro-enabled workbook, but it's just a different file structure. It's actually it's a binary file structure, which makes it a little bit smaller than the XLSM, a little more compact. Turn off for 2 hours. Turn on. Okay. So now if I run that, we should see, yeah, we've got only XLSM, XLSX. I don't think I have any XLSB files here, but those would all show up here as well. But of course, maybe I don't want just Excel files. Maybe I want just macro-enabled Excel files to be a choice. Let the user pick. You want all Excel files? Or do you want just macro-enabled Excel files? So I'll say Excel macro files. And for this one, I'll get rid of the XLSX, leave the other two. And then maybe I'll also put in just Excel macro free files. Free. And that will just be the XLSX. Which one should we start with? I mean, we can also tell it which one to actually have selected when the thing opens. Maybe we'll just do the XLSX files. Well, that is my first, second, third item in here. So we can say FD dot filter index. Here it is. And we'll set that equal to 3. So now we'll have 3 options in here, but the one that will be selected by default will just be the XLSX files. Go ahead and run that, make sure it works. Yeah, just our XLSX files. Yeah, it really is the third item in the list. We can come and look at just our macro-enabled ones. Now we're seeing only macro-enabled, and all files should bring back in even the XLSX files. So we've got some control over those filters. Questions here? Yeah, go ahead.
Is the comma right after like Excel macro files or Excel files, is it just saying like
So this one right here, that comma is separated. The question is, what's this comma? This looks like witchcraft here. And the answer is that is separating the arguments that we're passing to the add method. So there's the first argument, comma, here's the second argument. And then this comma inside is saying we've got one string argument here, but it's comma separated, and the file dialog knows how to split that apart based on the comma to make those 2 different kinds. Question?
I think it's going Victor, but if you put it in parentheses, then what's the difference between that and not putting all the arguments?
Okay, so what would happen if we tried to put this in parentheses here? And the answer is no, it just won't take it at all, because as soon as I put parentheses around, I am saying, hey, I'm going to do something with whatever this function returns. I don't even know what this function returns. Let's just see if we can print it. I don't even know if it's printable. I don't know. It may not return anything. But now that'll be syntactically okay because I'm doing something with the result. I'm trying to print it. It may not actually work. Let's just run it and see what happens. I don't know. We'll clear this off. Run that. Doesn't support this property or method. Debug.print. So it must not, I think add is not allowed to work as a function. I don't think add sends anything back in this case. That's my best. I have a misspelling here. Debug.print. It looks right. So yeah, the parentheses say hey, I know this thing, it returns a value, and I'm going to do something with the value. Right? The vast majority of languages, just put the parentheses on all the time. And how I wish that's what they had done when they made this language, because it'd be so much easier. Do I put parentheses or not? Yeah, you put parentheses, always. But here, it's syntactically different. I don't know what they were worried about. They were worried we might run out of parentheses in the world. We're going to have parentheses shortage of parentheses, and so don't use them if you don't need them. I know, we got to make sure we got plenty of parentheses to go around. By the way, since I've last seen you, I have gotten 2 emails from the university telling me to get ready for a university closure. Not like they're, know what's going to happen, but they're saying, you know what, if the time comes, we will have no hesitation to close campus. We don't want to be killing people here just to get their education. Yeah.
Did you see what they just came out with this afternoon? Someone with coronavirus.
Oh.
I was too.
Are you the guy with corona?
No, it's the one case that's up in Davis County. But he was at the Gonzaga game, so I'm glad that they're up there.
Yeah.
Can you imagine him talking about like something I have to tell you about? I was at the Gonzaga game.
I was in the opt-out.
Yeah. So in that case, I think we're still going to try to hold class. We'll just do it virtually. Now, I already record the lectures. You know what I'll probably do? I'll just like publish last semester. And that would be great. I'll just fill in the blanks. I'll be done. You guys will still have a bunch of work to do. So yeah, actually that would be great. Now that I think about that, well, no, it wouldn't be great. That'd be terrible. People are going to get sick and everything. Okay. So anyway, I don't know, that might come up. So yeah, so that's the filter index. One more property that I want to just show you is so what does it mean if I'm picking files? I can always choose multiple files, and the answer is no. You can tell it to not allow multiple files. So I'm just going to say fd dot, and it's the very first one, allow multi-select equals false. So now you won't be able to select multiple. That's the default, allow select multiple, but we'll turn this to false. And now when I run this, I can't choose multiple files. So hold down the shift key and kind of or the control key or whatever, click and drag, that didn't do anything. So I can only get one at a time. Probably don't really want that in there, but I just wanted to show you that. And there may be all kinds of other things. But the truth is that's probably all I've ever done to customize the file dialog box. What else do we have here? FD dot button name. Oh, I could probably change what's on the button. I really don't know this. Hello. I don't know what that did. That didn't say hello anywhere. So we have to study that a little bit, maybe Google it or something. All right, questions? No doubt there's all kinds of other kinds of customizations that we can do here. That'll get you going. Okay, well, neither of these first 2 things that we've seen are going to help you on the project, but go ahead. Yeah, that just says of all these filters that I have up here, which one is going to be selected by default when the thing opens. Yeah, and I think if you don't tell it, it'll be the first one, or it may be the last one that was selected the last time it was run. So here we're just saying we know which one we want to start with. Okay, so now let's go ahead and look at the problem of getting us to iterate through this set of files, because that's going to be a big part of your project. Open up Alabama, get all the data off of Alabama, put it into a database. Open up Alaska, get all the data off of Alaska, put it into a database. So let's just go ahead and do that. I'm going to make another sub procedure here. And actually, if we kind of think about this problem, we could write this in one sub procedure, something that iterates across all the files and processes each of those files at once. But there's such a natural division between the activity of iterating across the files and actually processing one file that I would like to do those as 2 separate sub procedures. So one will just iterate, and then one will just process that one file. And that'll be really helpful because imagine that, I'm working over here on Alabama and Alaska, and then I've got it all figured out, and then I run it, and it goes all the way to Texas, pushing all the data in. We finally get to Texas, and there's something about Texas that I didn't anticipate, and it just dies. So now I got to work on Texas. Well, it probably is going to take 4, 5, 6 seconds to process each file. And so if you're going to take 5 seconds for all of these, when you run it, just get down to Texas to see what's wrong, you make some change to your code, run it again to check. You don't want to have to wait through all of that. So if I separate this process into saying, all right, here's one that does all the looping, and then here's another one that I can just give it a path to a particular file, then I can just jump to Texas easily just by passing the path directly to it. The normal way to do it will be run the loop figures out the path and sends the path to my other one, but I can bypass that while I'm developing, and that'll be really handy. So that's the approach that we're going to take to get this set up. So maybe I'll just go ahead and make those two sub-procedures right now. I'll make a sub-procedure called process one file. And then I'll make another one called process all files. Maybe I'll just call it process all. And let's work on process all first. Because we just want to make a loop that can go across all of those files. It won't be too bad. Let me dim path, variable called path as a string. And I think I'm just going to get my path by calling the thing that we wrote earlier today. What was it? Called get folder path. We'll just let the user pick the path that they want to process the files from. So path is equal to get folder path. Excellent. So when I run this, it's going to put up that folder. If you pick a folder, I'll pick a folder and say, okay, oh, let's do this. Now, how can we tell if the user clicked cancel at this point? Right here in our code, how can we tell if the user clicked cancel? Well, it's going to get something. It's going to return a string. It'll be an empty string. If the user clicks cancel, this will be an empty string. And so I'm just going to take a peek at path right here, and we're going to say, if path is equal to an empty string, that means the user clicked cancel. Or however we got here, we don't have anything to process. So better get out of here. Then I'll just exit sub. EXIT sub. Okay, so if I get past that line, I've got something. I've got a path for me to be able to work with. Okay, so let me just go ahead and print that off and make sure that's working, and we'll move on. Debug.print my path. So if I run this, I should be able to pick something here. Down, oh, crime, I was already in the right place. Actually, incidentally, if you have it selected here and click OK, or if you go into it and don't select anything else, that's selecting the same thing. So I got my path. That's great. So this is going to be the path that has the files that I'm going to want to process. Okay. So now I'm going to show you how to iterate across all the files in that path. And what I'm about to show you goes back to the 1970s. So this is a built-in part of the BASIC language, and they carried it across when they were writing Visual Basic in the 1990s. And it's weird. It's different. I mean, the 70s were a weird time where we had kind of crazy hairdos, the afro. We invented the afro in the 1970s. I don't know, maybe it was around before. Bell bottoms, you know, it was a different time. And this is no exception. So let's see how to do it. To get here, I am going to declare another variable, dim file name as a string. So I've just printed off my path. Now here's what I'm going to do. I am going to say, oh, before I show you this, I'll get you started. File name equals something. I'll leave you in suspense for that. And we're going to set the Wayback Machine for like 1975. And I'm going to come to show you what all of our computers looked like in the 1970s. It wasn't even DOS yet. It was an operating system called CPM. And this was the same. They pulled this over from CPM when they made DOS in maybe the late 70s. What am I looking for? I am looking for PowerShell. They locked down the command prompt. I can't open the command prompt, but they allow me to open PowerShell. I don't know why, because PowerShell is way more powerful than the command prompt. But okay, so here I am, and this used to be the way computers looked. This was it, right? There's no windows, there's no mouse, there's no icons. It was just had no border around it. It was just a black screen with green letters on it, and here you were. And if you wanted to find out what files you had around, what would you type here? What was the command? dir. ls was the command, a list was the command in Unix, but in CPM and DOS, it was dir. And it would just give you a list of the files that you had in that particular folder. Actually, CPM didn't even have folders. It was just, you just had one collection of files, and dir would give it to you. And if I remember, let's do it again, dir. You can kind of see it moves pretty quickly. Oh man, I remember the first computer that we got at home that when you said dir, it went so fast you couldn't read the files names as they went by. I mean, it used to be you hit dir and it would go file, 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 file. You could read them. There was no file name too long. You couldn't read it as it went past. But you're not limited just as, let me come back to my, let me come a little deeper here. So we go to downloads. Whoops, I went to documents. And then we come to my crime. Okay, so here's all those XLSX files, but you could put patterns on it. dir, I don't want to see them all. I want to see the ones that start with m star dot star. And that will just give me the listing of the ones that meet that pattern, a wildcard kind of pattern. So this is what our life was like in the 1970s, and that's exactly what got brought into into BASIC, and then later into VBA. So we will actually, the command is actually the same one, dir. We're going to ask for a directory listing, and we're then going to give it like a path and a wildcard statement. Back up one more. Let me back up just a little bit here, and how do I copy here? Control M. Enter. Okay, so I could be somewhere else. CD /. And I could say dir, and I could tell it that's the path I want the directory. C:\users, whatever, crime / star.xls or m star.xls. Or just m star.star. So you don't have to be in the folder that you want the directory from. You could give it this kind of whole path and a wildcard statement together. We do the same thing here. So now I've gotten my path. The user's told me the path that they want to work on. I'm going to go ahead and I want to work with a list of files that's there. So it's going to be path, whatever the user gave me. I'm going to concatenate that with a / character. And then I will concatenate that with my wildcard, concatenate, which is going to be, in this case, star.xlsx. That way, if there's like some text files in there, I'm assuming we're only working with XLSX files. So if there's a macro-enabled file there, I don't want it. If there's a text file there, I don't want it. And so that will give me the filter. Now, as it turns out, all this stuff works exactly the same in Mac as it does in Windows, except for this guy right here. So what's the problem in the world of Mac for the file path separator? You Mac people? It's not /. What is it? It's /. It's the other slash. It's /. Why they did that, I don't know. I just want to curse them for when they made DOS for using the other slash. There's no good reason for that. And my life is miserable today because of it. Well, it's not miserable. I got a great life. But I have to think about what kind of slash I'm using. You know, it's a first world problem. So it turns out we can ask Excel which is the right path separator. And all I have to do is say application dot path separator. So if this is running on Windows, application path separator is /. If it's running on Mac, application path separator is /. So now this will work on Mac or Windows, either one just fine. Well, except that get folder path won't, because that only works on PC. But we're going to get rid of this before we're done today. And so, great, that should refer to that whole list of those files that I'm after, whatever the user chose, the / start.xlsx. Now, but here's the strange thing. You would expect that since dir returns a whole list of files, at the command prompt, that dir inside of VBA will return a whole list of files. But what was the other crazy thing about the 1970s is that we got almost no memory. We got tiny little amount of memory that we're working with. And so, say we can't afford to send back a whole list, because the list could be long, could be hundreds of file names, and we're not going to have enough memory. And so instead of sending back the whole list, it sends back the first one. You got the first file name back from this. So let's go ahead and give it a print. So debug.print file name. So now I'll run this. I should be able to pick my folder. Oops. I want to process all. I'm not sure I just did there. I'm going to cancel. Process all. I'm going to run that. I'll pick my folder. We'll say OK. And there it is. It just printed alabama.xlsx, just the one of them. Oh, how are we going to get to all the rest of them? Let's take a look. So here's what we're going to do. Is around my debug.print, I'm going to put a loop. Do and loop. It's an endless loop. I've got to be very careful before I run this. It'll print off Alabama a bunch of times. So I'll print the file name, and then I'm going to say, get the next file name. File name equals dir, all by itself. You can put the parentheses if you want, but don't put anything in the parentheses. When you call dir without telling it where to go and look for the files, it goes, oh, you just must want the next file after whatever I was asked for last time. And so this will take us to the next part of the list. Eventually, it's gonna have an error. If I keep asking after there's no more files there, it's gonna give me an error. Except for the first time I ask after I'm all the way through the list, dir will return a 0-length string. And I can use that to know that I'm done. So on my do loop, I will just say if file name, whoops, not if, it's already there, it's a conditional. If file name equals a 0-length string, what I want here is until. Do until file name is a 0-length string. So if, for whatever reason, whatever the user chose, there's no XLSX files, then this will return a 0-length string to begin with. And so this will be a 0-length string, do until file name is a 0-length string. It's already a 0-length string, and we bypass the print altogether. But if there's at least one file there, we'll come in, we'll print the first one, ask for the next one. Was there a next one? Yep, print the next, ask for the next one. Was there a next one? Yep, print that one, ask for the next one. And so now this should print off all 48 of those files. Seems like Idaho and Hawaii didn't report. We don't have data for those. I'm not sure why we're missing a couple. And we've printed off all of those. Excellent. Question here. Oh, yeah. So the question is, yeah. Couldn't we just open the file dialog and let them pick all those files? And then iterate across those? Absolutely. But what you're going to see, and maybe we'll do it now to answer your question, is that I really don't want the user to pick the folder. This folder is just going to be whatever folder is called crime in the location where my workbook is. So instead of setting my path equal to get folder, I'm going to set my path equal to, maybe I'll just come out this whole line and then do a different one here. I'll let my path equal this workbook dot path, wherever this workbook is saved. I'll concatenate on the path separator. And then I will concatenate on crime. I'm not sure how we would have a blank path at this point because it's got to start with wherever this workbook is. So now we're not letting the user pick at all. We're saying, listen, you just got to have this set up right. Wherever this workbook is, for this to work, you've got to have a folder named crime with a whole bunch of Excel files in it. And now it doesn't matter where that is, right? We could put that, onto a different folder. We could put it at the root folder. We could put it, just in our home directory, put it in documents or wherever. Now, actually, I say it doesn't matter where it is. There is one really big caveat here, and that is it has to be somewhere that starts with C:\\/ or D:\\/ It's got to have a drive letter. And what might you do that doesn't have a drive letter? Well, if you're like on a network shared folder, then you'll have a UNC path which starts with \\\. Or if you're like on your OneDrive, if you saved it on like OneDrive, what are you going to have here? https://. That's what your path is going to look like. Neither of those two are going to work because it has to have a drive letter, starts with drive letter \\. This is just a limitation of VBA. Might they someday figure out how to work with HTTPS? You'd think, because OneDrive, they're trying to push OneDrive, but they're also trying to get people to quit using VBA. So I don't know. The language really moves quite slowly. Okay, so yeah, you do have to be on a local drive for all this path stuff to work. So okay, so far so good. Now here's the problem. Let's suppose that I've got hundreds or thousands of lines of code that I have to execute. I mean, ultimately what's going to happen here is we're going to call process1file, and process1file could be huge and do a lot of things, including we might have to go look for some files using the, iterate across a list of files using dir. That's a problem. Because remember, my dir is only keeping track of one list of files. And so if I call something up here and this calls dir again and tells it to go look somewhere else, I've lost wherever I currently was on the original list. And so although it might be tempting just to say right here, well, great, I've got now the file name that I need. I'm just going to pass that off here to one file and let it do the work. That's going to be dangerous. And so instead, I'm going to make my own collection and fill it full of the file names that I want to process. And then I'll just run through that whole list and then be done with it. If someone else wants to call dir, or if I got some other process that calls dir, that's fine. I've already kind of set my list aside. Now, we've worked with arrays. In fact, we worked with dynamic arrays that we could create, an array that's, however big it needs to be. I'm going to show you a different way that gets you a lot of the same benefits and even some other neat ones that arrays don't do. And that's a thing called a collection. We've worked with some collections. What are some collections we worked with already in class? We have a collection of worksheets. We have a collection of workbooks. We got a collection of shapes on the worksheet. So those are all built-in collections, but it turns out we can make our own collection that just hold whatever we want it to hold. Here's how we do it. I'm going to dim something called files as a collection. Now, so far, most of, maybe even all of the objects that we've worked with, that we've bound object variables onto, this is just an object variable, just like other object variables that we've created, just a place to hold in memory a location of where an object is, another memory address where something is. So I'm going to have to set this equal to something. So I'll say set files equal to, and here's something new. Literally, it's new, the word new collection. And so what this does is it says, oh, we've got some kind of object here. We're going to create a new one. And the new collection statement will send back the memory address of where that object was created in memory. And so we can capture it here. It turns out there's a little shortcut that we can do. This is so common where we say declare a variable of this type, set that variable equal to a new one of those things, that they made a shortcut for it. And that is, we can come right here where it says collection, we can put the word new right here. And then we don't need this line at all. And so now we're creating an object variable that can refer to a collection, and we're creating the collection, and we're binding the address of wherever this was created onto the variable, all with just the one statement. Right? We don't have to put the keyword new here, in which case we would have to have a separate statement that actually binds that variable onto a particular collection, in this case, a new one. But I'm going to do this in one fell swoop. Okay? Now I'm ready to fill that thing up. So right here, as soon as I print off the file name, I'm going to push it into that collection. So the collection is called files. And we say files.add, and then we tell it what we want it to add, file name. Now, that would just add the file name, like Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, whatever. But I think I want the full file path. So I don't want just the file name. I want the path, the whole description to where that file is. Well, fortunately, I've got path and my application path separator already defined right here. So I'm just going to concatenate that on the front of this. So now I will put into this the full location where that file name, where that file is. Now I've got a separate object that has all those files. I don't have to worry about, am I going to call some other dir function that's going to throw off my list, because I've isolated it all right here. I'm not doing anything else here. Now I should be able to iterate across the items in that collection to be able to call my process1 file. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to create another variable, dim x as an integer. So I guess I need a little more room so we can see what's going on here. I've declared x as an integer. I finished the loop where I'm populating my list of file names. And now I'm just going to have a different loop that processes each one individually. So I'm going to say for x equals 1, 2. The name of my collection is files. It has a count property, as all collections do, upper boundary, the count. Next, and then here, I'm just going to call process1 file. And process1 file, I'm going to send it files sub x. So the first time through, I'm looking at my files collection, sending the first one, then the second one, then the third one, the fourth one, and so forth. So I've successfully built this part. Well, let's make sure it works well. I'm going to come up here and print whatever comes in. Oh, I got to receive it in here. So I'm going to call this file path as a string. And let me just print that off. It's pretty boring, but that'll get it, string. That'll get us going. Debug.print file path. So I have this loop down here that's looping across the whole collection. I'm sending, I don't need parentheses around this, sorry. I'm sending one full path, one full string that identifies where that file is up to process one file, and then process one file is just going to print it off. So I should actually see these file names printed twice. This loop, I'm printing at this loop where I'm loading up my collection. And then I'm iterating across that collection and printing off the whole path. Should look different because it has the path as a part of it as well. Question? F-I-L-E, there we go, thank you very much. So let me go ahead and process all. Let me open up my immediate window, clear it out, and process all. And we can see up here, we had just the file name. That's getting printed while we're loading the collection. And what we're putting into that collection is the full path to that file. And then we're looping across that again and sending that to process one file, and that's what's printing off the second one. Whew. Questions? Okay, so now I've kind of got to start at this. So here is process all, and all it really does is it figures out the files that we're going to process, and it sends them one at a time to where we're going to do the real work. Well, what should we do here? Let's just go ahead and open up those workbooks one at a time. As I'm opening that workbook, I'll probably want some way to refer to the workbook. So let me dim WB as a workbook, just an object variable, right? WW, that sounds like a battle that happens somewhere, WB. And now I will set WB equal to my collection of workbooks, has an open method, and I pass it a path that I want to open, file path. So now I will have that workbook open, but I will also have a variable hooked onto that workbook that I can use to control that workbook, to refer to that workbook, and in this case, to close it. WB.close. And then we'll just do whatever we need to do with that workbook. And for the project that you'll be working on, it's quite a bit. It's quite involved. So you're going to have to kind of go across that and figure out all the different colleges there and whatever campuses they're on and figure out which numbers have to go where and so forth. Go ahead. The question is, what's going on here? This looks like witchcraft. What is this? And yeah, let's talk through it. So workbooks is the name of a collection. It's an object, has methods, properties, and methods. And the method we're calling is open. So the open method, I give it a path, a full path to where a workbook is. And the open method goes, oh, we're just going to open up that workbook. We used to have 2 workbooks open. Now we have 3 workbooks open. This opens it up. But the open method also returns a reference to where that workbook is loaded into memory. That workbook starts somewhere in memory. And the open method, when it opens it, I mean, what it really does is says, hey, operating system, we need some memory because we're going to open this workbook. And the operating system says, great, here's some memory that you can use. And it says, here's the address of the memory. And the open method goes, okay, great, we're going to, right there, we're going to build this workbook. And then it says, somebody else might be interested in where this workbook is. And so the open method returns the address where it opened the workbook. And so that's what's coming back across this equal sign. And so because we're binding an object variable onto an object, or the address of that object, we use the keyword set. And now WB is it's a location in memory. It's holding the memory address where the workbook is. But because it's an object variable, it gives me this little shorthand thing that becomes another way for me to refer to that workbook. So now I can say wb.close, and it's just like if I said active workbook.close, a different way to get to that particular workbook. Let's go ahead and print that off. So debug. Let's print something on here. I think the name of the state is actually in the workbook in A2. So WB workbook that we just opened. Now here's the trouble is that I don't know what sheet it's on, but I do know enough about these and there's only one sheet. But I think it might even be called different each time. I think the name of the state might be a part of the sheet. So here I'm just going to say worksheets number 1. There's only one worksheet there, so that would be the worksheet I'm after. And then I want range A2. And I want the value. So now instead of printing the path, as I did before, which gave me this, these long strings to the path, I'm going to use that path to open a workbook, and then I'm going to print something out of that workbook. And if memory serves correctly, that'll just be the name of the state. So I'm going to process all. Let me clear off my window. I'll process all. It's going to take a while because it has to open up each workbook individually. So it's opening up the workbook. It's writing out whatever is in A2. It's closing the workbook. Very important to remember to close the workbook. Otherwise, you'd have 50 workbooks open or 49 workbooks open. And you can go close them one at a time, or you can write a loop that closes all the workbooks, except save what you're doing first because you might close that one by mistake. Okay, looks like we made it. I'll come back to my code. Yeah, sure enough. So here's the file names that got printed while I was filling up the collection with file names. And then here's what's coming up. Alabama 1. Oh, it has a footnote on it. And that footnote just comes across as part of the text. We don't get any of the formatting. So that'll be something, another thing you're going to have to do in that project is kind of look to see if there's any numbers on the end of the state, get rid of them. Well, I think I already know about how to get rid of numbers. We did that for another project, but it won't be too bad. Questions? Yeah, go ahead. Where did file path come from? So I'll talk you through it. So here, remember, we created 2 sub-procedures that are going to work together to process all these files. This one is just looping across the files, right? So this, reads all the files, puts them into a collection. And then we're looping across that collection. So we've got X is going to go from 1 to however many files we have in our collection. Now we're calling that other procedure process one file, but we're passing to it whichever item we had in the collection at that spot. So when X is 1, this is the first thing in our collection. When X is 2, it's the second thing in our collection, and so forth. Well, for this to work, we've got to have a variable all set up to receive that value over here in process one file. So when we come up to process one file, sure enough, right here inside the parentheses, we've declared a variable that is just there to receive whatever we passed to it. So the first time this runs, it's going to be the full path to that Alabama file. Second time it runs, it'll be the full path to the Alaska file. And then to there's like four A states, or there's only 3. Arizona is one of them, I don't know. It's the current, so we are passing the value here, and it's getting named file path, and it's coming from whatever is right here. Yeah, so in fact, what happens, unless we do something strange to make it happen otherwise, let me show you. Let me just open up Paint. Here's Paint. Let me define our memory somewhere. We got memory is out here floating around. We got memory. We got memory here. And then somewhere here in memory, we've got a little block of memory that has a name. Well, some way to refer to it. It's there somewhere. And I am going to refer to this as files sub 3. So this is not the first time through the loop, but it's one of our times through the loop. And let me make that a little bit bigger. Maybe a little bit bigger. So that is like the name of that location in memory. And what do we have there? We have, like it's a full path. I can't fit it in here because I didn't make it big enough, but it's a full path to something like C:, / Alabama dot whatever, okay? I guess ALABAMA dot XOSX. So I should have made my little box bigger to hold that in, but that's what it has in there. And so when we pass files sub 3 up to our other procedure, well, what really happens is we've got another name up here called file path, and file path then just becomes another name for that same location in memory. So file path is pointing to, so we've got this path sitting somewhere in memory. It's in that collection. And file sub 3 will get me to that location in memory. But when I pass file sub 3 up to file path, that's what happens right here. When I say call process1 file and give it a particular one of those items, then file path up here just becomes another name for that same location in memory. So I can refer to it and go, oh, it's right there. And the whole thing is designed to be able to do just exactly what we're doing here, is be able to say, I've got a value that I'm working with some over here. I need it somewhere else. Just pass that value to that other procedure and you're ready to go with it. Whew. Questions? Okay. So if you've never ever taken a note in this class before, that's okay. I mean, I think I told you I never took notes. Well, I did for a while. Did I tell you about my experience with taking notes in college? I used to take notes. I took very bad notes. And then I realized at one point, I never even went back and read my notes. I thought it's kind of pointless. Why am I even taking notes? And then I was sitting in Econ 110. Is there still even a class called Econ 110 around here? It's like a microeconomics, introduction to microeconomics. And we just had learned the basics of supply and demand curves. And I said, wow, when you have a high supply and a low demand, the cost should be pretty low. And you need to understand the dynamics for information goods that you could produce extra without, incurring much more cost. And I looked around, I'm in an auditorium, there's like 500 students taking notes, high supply. I'd never heard of anyone tried to buy notes before, low demand. These things should be next to free. I never took another note again in my whole collegiate career. I just would spend the first part of the semester finding someone who took good notes and get to know them a little bit, and then ask if I could buy a copy of their notes. And they always said exactly the same thing. I'll give you a copy of my notes. And they were way better than any notes I would ever take. This actually worked really well for me until I took my art history class. I was a senior. I was about to graduate. I'm taking art history. You got to take notes in art history. The book doesn't have it all. And so, I found someone. She took fabulous notes, great notes. I said, hey, I would really love to buy a copy of your notes before the midterm. She said, I'll give you a copy of my notes. That's great, wonderful. And sometimes I sat next to her, sometimes I didn't. Comes to the day before the midterm. Class is over, hey, I'd really like to get a copy of your notes. And she said, Gov, you've been here every day. You haven't even missed a single day. I'm not going to give you a copy of my notes. I was in trouble, big trouble. I didn't have any notes to study for the midterm exam. And someone had written, like on the board, had written a thing that said, hey, we're having a study group. I thought, study group's my only chance now. So I went to the study group. And we're studying for it. Have you taken art history? Any of you take art history here? Yes, some of you. And we're studying and we're kind of going over all this stuff from the book and the notes. And someone goes, do we have to know all these dates? And we're thinking, she didn't say anything about dates. Have to know these dates? Know about dates. And this was back in the 1990s. You could still look up professors' telephone numbers relatively easily. So I said, I'm going to call her. I'm going to call my professor at home. So I called her. So we have to know the dates. And she was all, Gov, this is an art history class. Of course you have to know the dates. Like, that was so obvious to her. She didn't think it was worth bearing, that you should mention that in class. So I came back to the study group and I said, we got to know dates. And they went, yeah, I don't think we'll have to know the dates. I said, look, I called her. She said, of course, you know the dates. And they just didn't believe me. There was one guy who said, I believe you. So we got together. We went to a buffet, like a pizza buffet. We went in as soon as it opened at like 11 a.m. and we stayed there till like 9 p.m. and ate pizza and studied dates. It was like, that's all we did. And we took the test the next day, and it was, here's a picture, who made it, what was the date? That was the whole test. The picture, who made it, what was the date? Anyway, I got the high score on the test. And poor gal who wouldn't give me her notes, you know, we were sitting next to each other. And this was back, you know, before we cared much about FERPA. I was an accounting student. The professor said, oh, and our high score goes to our accounting student, you know, and she gives me the high score. There's a little extra credit, so I got 108% on the test. And the 2 points I lost, I actually got right, but she wouldn't hear my appeal. So anyway, the poor gal who wouldn't share her notes, I didn't see how she did, but I kind of looked away. How did you do? Anyway, I don't know. So I forget why I got off on that story, but it's kind of a fun story. So, oh yeah, if they've never taken a note before, you should probably note this. And that is that today's date, what is today's date? March 9th. So when it comes time to doing that next project, project number 5, you're gonna say where we're gonna start. We're gonna go pull the video, or at least the file from March 9th, and we're gonna say that's the starting point for the project. That'll be, because I wrote this example today thinking this is just what you need to get started on that. This will get you started really well on that project. So don't write this again. Come make sure you understand it, copy the right parts in, and bring it in, and you'll be good to go. Okay, I think that's it for today. Other questions? All right, thanks for coming. Class dismissed.